Why, hello everybody, this is Robbie from Southern California, and I have now wandered into Gary's garden, so I am turning this over to Gary. We're here to talk, let me real quick say, if any of the color is off on the camera, we are dealing right now with a marine layer and smoke in the air, so the color is really off today. But we're gonna get this done even in this weather right now. So
Okay.
here's Gary.
Okay, so it's September 2020 and this is how my garden looks today.
Lots of garlic chives.
Yeah, the garlic chives are flowering. I've got a lot of bees pollinating them. I've got them spaced every corner in this bed. The dragonflies aren't out yet, but this place this year has been swamped with dragonflies, so we've got a lot of those breeding now. They're coming out of my ponds, so every year I set up more ponds, I get more dragonflies, so that's pretty awesome. And my self-watering wicking beds are doing well. There's a lot of things going on in here, a lot of different plants that, you know, are just sort of blending into the environment. So my dragon fruit that I planted, I've started to hook some of those up with the rebar hooks. So they're getting big. So hopefully next year I should have dragon fruit growing down here, or at least fruiting. Some of my rhubarb I had to throw shade cloth over because it didn't like the heat so well. This one here has been hammered because it's positioned in my garden, but the other ones further along are doing well.
The heat was what, about 112, 115 down
112 to 115. And this is the southern side of my garden, so this is the hot side of my garden, and it's got no real shade down here. So I tried to grow things that are going to like the heat on this side.
Is this ash?
That's ash. Yeah, there's ash everywhere. So yesterday we were wearing face masks because of the ash. Today we don't need the face masks because we've got moderate air conditions. So hopefully the air quality's okay today. But the rhubarb is doing really well. I harvested 40, 50 pounds of it so far, and this is the first year that I grew it. I should have put more shade cloth over it sooner because it does have sun damage, but it's okay, it's going to come back. It's already got a lot of new growth, so these older leaves that have got burnt a little bit are going to protect the new growth. So I've got a lot of that in the freezer. I harvested it and froze it.
What did you do anything fancy with it, or just no blanching, no nothing?
No blanching, no nothing, just cut it into roughly 1-inch sections, threw them in a freezer bag, and they don't tend to stick together and they're easy just to grab handfuls of them out. I'm setting up more totes along here. I started setting up some beans, and I've got some kabocha, or it's not kabocha, it's the smaller squash.
Delicata?
Delicata. I've got some of those. They really don't need the shade cloth, but I did have a bean growing here. So this bean needs a little bit of shade. That doesn't like the sun. The delicata can be in full sun. And I covered this up to protect my other beans along here. So that's
the other rhubarb.
That's the other rhubarb. Yeah, that's a smaller plant, and that's another bigger plant. It's a little bit more shaded down here, plus I did throw shade cloth over it. I removed that this morning. I need to come along and remove the artichokes. It's starting to come back, so I need to trim these canes back and keep watering this. So next year I'm going to have a lot of artichokes. I let some go to flower just for the bees. I don't need any more seed, so there'll be seed in here. Some of the other plants, this was an old plant that I transplanted down maybe 2 years ago. and that's on its way out. But the purple tree collards are doing really well.
Wow.
I've got a bit of a hedge going here, and the main reason I've got the tree collards is for the compost. So there's a lot more food for us to eat and plenty of leaves for composting. So I've been harvesting the leaves and they've been going into the totes, the bottom of the totes, before I start planting. Got another tote here that I set up, and I've got a bean inside there. I've got some Malabar spinach plants that I just transplanted over here, and then another delicata squash. So I wanted to shelter the beans from the sun, so I put a little shade cloth there.
Oh, you're supporting the tree collards with
my rebar stakes or my rebar hooks.
Yeah, that's good, because boy, did they go over.
Yeah, they do go over. The one behind you, the green tree collard, I didn't stake that early enough, so that's kind of coming up. It's winding along the ground and coming up from the ground. I've got it staked a little better now. So I've got the purple tree collard and the green tree collard. I planted a watermelon here. I'm not sure how that's going to go because it's fairly late in the season. It does have a couple of watermelons forming. I'm not sure if they're going to fall off or whether they're going to grow, but we'll see what happens.
I just have to go in on this. Look how beautiful and purple. Wow.
Yeah, and as the weather cools off, that'll get even more purple. So my pepinos are doing really well. I've got some that are going to be ready to be harvested soon. So I've wrapped those in tulle. So I wrapped it in the red tulle, that way I can see it easily. Because when a pepino's in amongst the greenery, it's often hard to find, but with the red tulle, you can spot it really easily. I'll need to tulle a couple of more of these because they're starting to get ripe. My lemon verbena, I've got that staked up a little bit too. I need to trim this back. I want to use this as a upper story plant, so that will provide shade for anything I grow underneath. It'll just give filtered light down to the ground. So that's a good plant, I like it. It also has that lemony smell, so when you brush against it, it releases the lemon flavour or the lemon smell.
I can smell it standing way back here.
Yeah, and hopefully that will confuse any insect pests too. So along here, yes, I've got tomatoes that are growing up there.
And this is sweet potato all over growing, right?
Yeah, I have sweet potato growing pretty much everywhere, and I use that as a ground cover. It helps retain the moisture in the soil. And I grew some cucumbers this year for the first time in years. I know some of them are turning orange and they need to be harvested, but I've found that they're still edible when they're orange. That doesn't affect the flavour that much at all. And my Malabar spinach, I've got Malabar spinach that's growing around my pond down there, and I've just been pulling small parts out. Like I can remove cuttings or plants that are that size, and they transplant really well. I just have to take them out and stick them in the ground somewhere, and they really want to take off. So the Malabar spinach is taking off. This plant here and the one on the other side are from last year. These are from this year because they're dropping a ton of the seeds and they're coming up all over the place. And obviously I can't eat enough of it. I'm going to use that kind of as a shade plant too, because I want to grow vertically. I've got this opportunity to grow vertically, so I may as well run with it.
Look at all, these are pepinos,
These
right?
are pepinos.
They're all over.
And they're flowering again. They continuously produce for me here. So we're in Southern California. USDA Zone 10A, Sunset Zone 23, and these are perennial plants, and here they'll just continue growing all year long. So with that, it's just a matter of raking away the wood chips, sticking it in the ground. So I've got soil underneath, and I'll come back later and I'll water it, and it'll take off like this one has.
And that's how easy it is to plant Malabar spinach.
Yeah. My ubis or purple yams are doing really well. The ones in this structure here didn't seem to get bothered by the sun or the heat. Some on the outside got a little bit burnt, but they're going to do okay. So this time of the year, when we've got warm nights, especially now, the temperature doesn't sort of cool down at night, this is when they really grow their best. So we've had a fairly cool spring, and the growth wasn't as vigorous as it has been in some years. So they're very productive if we've got warm nights. So our nighttime temperatures usually drop into the 60s. Right now they're dropping into the 70s, and these plants really love the warm nights.
They're all over. I'm going to back up so you can see more, because you can't see it. Look at that. All of them just, it's almost like they took off overnight.
Yeah,
it wasn't that thick.
They weren't that thick. Within a couple of weeks they just really took off. They really do like the warm weather. And the turmeric loves the warm weather too. So my turmeric's doing really well. And tucked away behind there I've got my original pond. It's kind of a bit overgrown right now. But this is where the original dragonflies came from. My ginger's getting a little bit crowded out. It's a little bit too shaded here for it, so I'm going to have to cut some of my cannas back to allow more light in. But my ginger's a little slow again this year. I didn't get the cannas out of the way to allow enough light in. My taro's doing well. I've got small taro planted in a couple of places. And my bananas, they got hit and burnt by the heat, so I've got a lot of leaves that I'm going to remove. Once the warm weather tapers off a little bit, I'll remove the leaves, but I've got a lot of bananas that should be ready. They're ripening, and they should be ready fairly soon. So we're going to have an abundance of bananas. So this year I think we should freeze a lot of them.
Look how big those leaves are. So you got two big batches here.
I've got two good big hands of bananas here. Yeah, I think that one's pretty much done producing bananas, so I'll cut that back here just to leave the bunch. And with the tree collard leaves, I'm just composting in place. I just throw it under my bananas, and that's what I've been doing down here. And I've got, go on.
No, I was just going to say, you don't talk about your sweet potatoes. The whole field is sweet potatoes.
Yeah, the sweet potatoes just cover the ground pretty much anywhere. And I'll get to harvesting some of those soon. I've got two fig trees. I've got one down here and one down the other end, and this is the best tasting one. This year this fruited. It's a little slower on the fruiting than yours were, but this is a nice tasting fig, so I'm going to trim it back a little bit. And over summer it produces good shade, and in the winter the leaves will drop and it'll allow more light in. So I like the idea of having a fig tree in my garden. So I don't really have too many trees here I consider this a food forest, and instead of having trees I've got the frame, and then my lower canopy I've got fig trees and I've got the lemon verbena. So I'll plant some of those sort of plants in here just to provide a little bit more shade.
Is that turmeric?
Yeah, this is turmeric.
More turmeric.
Originally I was growing turmeric in here and I dug most of it up, but I left a couple of pieces by accident and these came up last year. I left them in the ground. So hopefully these will flower this year. I've got another one further down that's flowering already. I planted some more ubis in totes this year. I decided to experiment with growing them in totes. That'll make harvesting a lot easier.
Remember, he was the one that swore he'd never grow in totes.
Yeah, so the holes in the totes are directed towards my turmeric here.
How do you like the totes?
The totes are really good. They've worked out really well.
Let me ask you a question. I don't know that much about ubes. You're the expert. By growing in totes, will it constrict their size, though? Because I know you've picked some that were massive. I don't even remember you weighed one. What was the biggest one?
If I grow them straight in the ground, I've had them 15 pounds. So I'll put 1 pound in a good year and I'll get 15 pounds out of it. This year I'm not sure how well they're going to produce, and I haven't tried them in totes, so I know how big of the pieces were that I put in the totes. I just have to harvest it and see how productive it was growing them in totes. And the totes, the soil in the totes is fresh this year. The soil where they're growing in the ground, I've had wood chips on for 4 or 5 years, so the soil's a lot better where they're growing in the ground. So it may take a couple of years for the wood chips to change the soil in the totes. So I'll just keep adding wood chips to the top of the totes and get them going that way.
The thing is, I do know that, I don't know how to word this. When you start digging them up, it is a real pain in the ground. I remember it was like a real dig, and it was hard, and to pull it all out and they break. So it'd be interesting. It will be interesting when you dig these out. Even if they're not as big, you may have more control as to, I'm sorry, I got sidetracked. You have orioles nesting?
No, that wasn't an oriole. That was
because it just flew by me.
That was a song sparrow.
It was a song sparrow?
Yeah, one of the song sparrows.
Okay, because it just came behind me, because I know you have multiple oriole nests in here, and he came behind me and he was moving around in the trees, in the bananas, and here he gets tons of nests.
The soil here is clay, and that's why it's harder to dig it out of clay.
I remember it was such a job to dig it out. Going back to the ubes, sorry. Even though they may not be as big, it'll be so much easier maybe to get something right away when you want it and then just replace it.
Yeah, because I did mix sand with our native clay soil because I'm trying to create a loamy soil, which is a lot easier to dig in.
So it's basically an experiment.
It's an experiment.
Which to me sounds like it might do quite well, being that it will be easy to find, get, and retrieve than coming out here, and you almost need a bobcat to dig some of those out.
Yeah, next year I'm sure they're going to do better. Some of the leaves are yellowing a little bit, and that I think is because of the soil conditions. And some of them are doing better than others, but once the soil gets good, and once I've improved the soil, it will do much better.
I mean, comparing them, you've got quite a few totes. It's only one that went a little yellow, and that one is still growing. Look at the top growth.
Yeah, the top growth is green.
So something disrupted it. It could have even been the heat, maybe, or the sun. Maybe got sunburned there. Because think about it, it's only those two, and then the rest are all beautiful. So I'm wondering if it could have been the sun maybe coming through.
Well, what I'm suspecting is that the lower growth has already grown and the soil may not have been quite conditioned until by the time it got up there, the soil had started to create its own biology, so things were improved. It was improved soil. Because I did start with fresh soil and I didn't wait. I just filled them, planted the ubis and went from there.
Okay, because all in all the way down, going all the way down to the last tote, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 look beautiful, and 2 look a little struggling, and yet I can see the new growth on that one is already nice, and of course that one, the first one that was yellow, it's all beautiful and green up there.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see how it goes. I'm just thinking, when I tell you, oh, let's get some ube, it's like you have to come down here and dig through all the sweet potatoes. It's like, oh,
Yeah,
maybe
remove
tomorrow.
the sweet potatoes, then the wood chips, and then get into the soil.
It'd be interesting to see how it goes. I see Swiss chard all over the ground like weeds.
Yeah, it's going to come up, like there's going to be a lot of Swiss chard seed. I cleared it out since the last garden tour, and there's going to be a lot of Swiss chard come back. And this is my hot tub pond, and I'm using this mainly as a nursery. So I planted lettuce here, and the lettuce this is straight composted arborist wood chips. There's no soil in there. The lettuce didn't do well under these conditions, so I'm going to experiment a little bit more with my soil mixes. So these produced a few leaves and then they bolted. I'll see how things go, but I used this mainly as a nursery. So I planted a few different things in here, like I put my cuttings in here of different plants and then I harvest it. So I've got my black turmeric planted in here, my white turmeric, and the yellow turmeric. The yellow turmeric does a lot better in my garden than any of the other turmerics, and it does better than my ginger too. So the turmeric I'm doing really well with. And I did plant a couple of other beans. This one's the runner beans, the crimson runner beans. So I'm going to plant a lot of these throughout my garden because they're perennials and they'll last a few years, and they'll also attract hummingbirds. The flowers really attract the hummingbirds. So I like having plants that are dual purpose, and this one will produce the edible beans and it'll also feed the hummingbirds.
And that's the other fig tree?
This is the other fig tree, yeah.
And this one doesn't taste good?
It tastes okay, but it's not as good as the other one. And I'll have to trim this down because a lot of the fruit is too high and the birds are getting to it before I can. But because it shades my plantain banana a little bit, I left it here. So I've got to organise my bananas a little better, figure out how to shade them a little more. And that's pretty much it.
Well, yeah, but that's really not covering
No,
everything.
It's not going to cover everything.
Well, there's that tote with,
Yeah,
with the bed rail, or
yeah, that tote with the bed rail. And I
what is
realised,
it? I'm sorry. What is mattress frame?
yeah, it's a mattress frame. And Malabar spinach doesn't like growing in this spot, and I can see it got a lot of sun damage, so it needs a more shady location. It doesn't like high temperatures. So I've had trouble growing Malabar spinach here. It does a lot better in a more shaded, protected environment.
Did we do this side? I don't think we actually...
No, we didn't do this side,
Okay,
and there's a couple other things down here that...
Let's walk over here a little bit. Yeah, none of the solar pumps are going to be working right now because we're in full, deep shade.
Yep,
I see things moving around. Would that be the fish?
yep. But I've got fennel, wild fennel growing everywhere. I use that for my tea. Got a ton of that. I've got my red roselle. It's growing here.
Look at the flowers.
I've got a lot of different things just scattered amongst the place. Okra. I was trying to think what this
Oh, I
was
thought
called.
you were showing it to me.
No,
It's like,
yeah, I've
no,
got.
you eat it that size, don't
I
you?
eat it this size. When it's this size, I like to cut it open and eat the seeds when they're green.
You
Like
eat the seeds?
I eat the seeds, yeah, because if you eat this part, it's very fibrous. But I just scoop the seeds out and I eat the seeds when it gets this big. Otherwise, raw.
Oh,
Otherwise, I prefer them when they're this big, maybe a little bit bigger, and then I'll just bust them off, and I eat them as I move through my garden. So I just graze on them. Yeah, there's a lot of things that we didn't cover. I've got eggplant scattered around different places, and everything's sort of hidden like a forest amongst each other. And this is my purslane. So that's gone to seed. And again, next year I'm going to have a lot of purslane. So the seeds are going to drop and it's going to come back again. And with some luck, it's going to be spread all over the place. So I've got purslane, I've got different things hidden amongst here. It's a little bit difficult to go through and remember where everything is, but as I go through in the morning, I'll spot something and I'll grab it and I'll take it in for breakfast.
I see celery. Do I see tomatoes all over now?
Yeah, there's tomatoes all through here. I've got parsley growing through here. It's all hidden in amongst this, and I really don't have that. I really don't have a pest problem. So none of this seems to be eaten by much. I do have the birds come in and they take care of the caterpillars. So I have a lot of wrens down here more than anything else. And yes, I've got tomatoes. There's going to be ripe tomatoes somewhere scattered amongst this area. I guess there's none right now, but the tomatoes, I've got a tomato plant here and I've got one over there. And they're just sort of, everything's growing together. I've got mint, that's my mint bed. The sweet potatoes are taken over that. I've got the celery, I've got that red celery. So that's got the red stalk on it. And it tastes good when it's at this stage, but once it goes to flower, then it gets hot. It gets spicy hot. And I know some people don't like it when it's spicy hot. I've also got a few potatoes growing now. I've already harvested a lot of potatoes. I don't do so well with potatoes. That's why I've gone to grow yams. The true yams are my version of potatoes because I do well with those. I don't do so well with the potatoes. I haven't really cracked the code on potatoes yet, but I persevere with them. Okay, so that's
So you think that's it for today?
pretty much it for today.
Everything looks really
Yeah.
good.
This is a transplant from your garden. It's a kale hybrid, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of mine, the ones that came up from seed, would be, it could be collard and kale hybridized because the leaves look really odd, but they taste good.
Yeah, I like staking things like this because it keeps them vertical. Yeah, I guess with that, I guess that ends the garden tour. Hopefully it's going to keep people sort of interested. Oh, my one last thing, the turmeric flower.
Oh. This is literally a field of sweet potatoes everywhere. I have not come down to see it.
So that's my first turmeric flower for the season. And I planted this turmeric last year around this pond, and it takes 2 years for the flower to come onto the plant. So if I continuously harvested and not left it, I wouldn't get any flowers. I think it's got a couple more forming down the bottom. So this is how they look when they first start to come out. They've got that little yellow to it.
How beautiful. So the average person isn't really going to see flowers if they keep harvesting it to eat it.
Yeah, if you keep harvesting, growing to eat it, and you keep harvesting and you put the small pieces back every year, you're only going to get the green plant. But if you leave some in the ground, the second year you'll get the flower. So it's kind of a biennial flowering.
Wow, beautiful. It is beautiful. Does it have a smell?
It's got a slight smell.
How beautiful it is. All right. I think you've got lettuce in there too. Is that lettuce seed?
That's lettuce. Yeah,
Okay.
I spoke about lettuce when we were on the
Okay.
other side there.
I missed that. Sorry.
So I've got a few, I've got cannas, I've got a lot of different things scattered in there.
Everything looks beautiful.
Okay, so I guess with that, that concludes the garden tour in my garden. And if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. And with that, thanks for watching. And don't forget to eat what you grow.
Bye-bye.
Bye.